and you automate the time so it kind of like let me just play it. Yeah, that effect you hear at the start where it's kind of I'm not gonna try and do it. Hey, it's your boy Sean, aka BIGMOO here. It has been a month since my collab with Fatman, Scoop, and Titus To The Top came out on Spinnin / Maxximize. Got a ton of support from some huge DJs, Afrojack, Showtek, Mike Williams, Dimitri Vegas, and Like Mike. It's racked up a couple 100,000 streams in its first month, which I think is pretty cool. And so today I thought I'd take you behind the scenes, show you the project file, tell you a bit of backstory about how we made the track. So how it actually came about, you might be wondering, how the hell did I manage to collab with someone like Fatman Scoop? It's pretty crazy, even surreal for me, to collab with such a legend of the scene. Basically, 9 months ago, I signed to a new manager, and he just happened to be good friends with Fatman Scoop. So that's pretty much the short story of how it came about. Obviously, I still have to pay him a pretty fat vocal fee. But yeah, definitely, I jumped at the opportunity. I was like, sounds amazing, let's do it. So I gave Scoop the original idea and the theme that I wanted of the track. He went away, he wrote the lyrics. There was a bit of back and forth over WhatsApp, voice messages and whatnot, but he pretty much smashed it from the get-go, and I was really happy with how it was sounding. There was funny story, there was actually one line which we just could not get right. Like, it was the line where it goes, "Started, coach, now we're in the jet." He originally said, "We're in the private jets," and for me that just sounded like a little bit too kind of like corny, I guess. And I was telling him, I was like, "No, let's change it to this," and he was like, "Bro, I can't fit it. It won't fit. The line won't fit." And I was like, no, trust me, like, say it like this, it'll fit. He was like, bro, it won't fit. Like, we were back and forth probably like 50 times on this one line. Eventually got there in the end. Really happy with how it sounds. And then we had this problem called Fatman Scoop just basically shouts and doesn't really rap. So we needed someone to fill the verses, and immediately the first person to come to my head was Titus. The dude is an absolute legend. I've been wanting to collab with him for forever. I have always been a huge fan of his sound. I think he's super underrated. And having heard him on tracks with Julian Jordan, Afrojack, Havoc Roth, I've loved everything he's put out. So he was definitely my first choice for it. And so I told my manager, I was like, I want Titus. Go get Titus. So he came back like a week later and he was like, dude, Titus is in. Let's do it. And I was like, fuck yeah, that's sick. So Titus went away, wrote some vocals. The dude literally just nailed it from the get-go, like knocked it out of the park. That's the amazing thing about working with such talented vocalists like Scoop and Titus, is they just get it right the first time. It makes my life extremely easy. So the track really came together pretty seamlessly, pretty quickly, relatively effortlessly compared to what I've had in collabs before where it's just like endless back and forth. The whole thing was done in a matter of like maybe a couple months, which is fast for me. Yeah, and then from there, finished the mix, finished the master, sent it over to Maxximize, and straight away they were like, this is sick, we want to sign it. And I was like, that's fucking awesome. Second release on Maxximize. I was super pumped about that. My first solo release on Maxximize / Spinnin, which feels pretty special for me. So without further ado, I am super fucking hungry. So I'm going to go eat some tacos, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you the project file. I'm going to show you the basics of how I made it. I'll see you in a sec. Wow, it has been 2 days. I totally forgot about this video, but I did eat tacos, which is the most important thing. You'll be relieved to know. Welcome to the inside of the To The Top project file. You may notice this is not the full project file. This is just the stems. Main reason being my laptop can totally not handle playing every single sound back and recording the screen at the same time. Last time I did this, I did a full vibrations walkthrough for Spinnin. The video took me like 2 hours to film, 10 hours to edit, and my laptop shut itself about 100 times. So to avoid all that headache and heartache, and because I'm lazy as fuck, I'm just gonna show you the stems, okay? So that's what you're gonna get today. Let's begin from, well, the beginning of the track. We're gonna start with the break. I'm gonna walk you through each of the elements one by one, and that's pretty much gonna be how this is gonna go. All together, sounds like this. You wanna know what victory feel like? You wanna know what victory look like? You get it, right? You've heard the track before. So, taking you on the inside, pretty simple. The break's obviously quite empty. The vocal's obviously the main element there, so we want everything around it to kind of just add to it, not distract from the vocal too much. Obviously, Fatman Scoop, he's got some pretty rich, powerful vocals, and we want to let those shine through. So, in the background, we've got this cool little trap kind of plucks, and then a huge reverby pluck that comes in afterwards. And you'll hear like a little kind of like tick-tock, sort of fast shakers just to give it a bit of rhythm, give them a bit of movement. A big fat re-space that comes in. And you hear, obviously, I open up the filter as the note continues. I believe this is a silent preset from one of Husband's packs. I love Husband's Reese basses. I use them all the time, every single track. Drop lead filters in as the build starts. Some basic drums. Kind of trap style, like really metallic sounding, almost disgusting kind of snares. And then we got a typical snare build up here. Just a clap. Yeah, nothing super crazy exciting there. Pretty basic shit. Some effects as well in the break. The typical trap church bell. I've used that in quite a few of my tracks. Pretty cool, typical rises, nothing super exciting going on there. There is a pretty cool trap kind of, which is just me fucking around in silence, changing like the LFO and some other stuff. I can't remember. It's been like 9 months since I made the song. Give me a bit of slack. So that's the break. Pretty simple, pretty chill. Obviously, one thing we forgot to cover. The vocals, how good are these? They came...
You wanna know what victory checks and we won? We never...
They came already pretty processed, so I didn't have to do a whole lot. I can walk you through how I process my vocals later. Fairly basic. There's a YouTube tutorial on how Kashmir processes his vocals. It's kind of pretty similar to that. I follow a similar process. Basic EQ compression and some saturation and, you know, reverb and all that fun stuff.
Let's go! We chase success, cause we nothing but the best. What we do, we get them checks, and we won. We never rest. It's a full court press, and we do it to the death. What are we? Best dressed. Started coach, now we in the jet.
Yeah, so here's vocals, obviously super fat, super thick. To accomplish that is a couple layers. There's just lots of layering of really similar takes. That's how we get it to sound so fat. And then there's shitloads of like compression, saturation, and a lot of reverb as well to really get it to sound big and, you know, open and epic. So that's the break. That's the whole thing. Super simple. Let's jump into something a little more juicy and exciting, and that is going to be the drop, which goes a little bit like this. Cool. Oh, haha. This is juicy. I love it. By the way, as you'll see, I have a DIY mastering chain on there. This isn't the final mastering chain that was used. This was mastered by someone else. I always prefer to get someone else, like a mastering engineer, to master my tracks, just so at least I have kind of a second pair of ears. When you've heard the same track 500 million times, it's always good to get someone else to listen to it because they hear things that you might have missed. So this is just kind of a DIY master to get it, you know, kind of 90% there. And then the final master is done by someone else. Kick. Very boxy, very punchy. It's almost like a trap kick almost, in that it's very kind of like stereo a little bit. But yeah, very, yeah, very thumpy, very thick. Drums. Really quite a disgusting sounding snare, to be perfectly honest. But hey, it fit with the rest of the track. So I didn't mind. And then we bring in some rides after that in the second half. Just give it some swing, give it some groove. The bass. Ooh, ooh la la, delicious. Cool. So, a couple layers going on here. It was fun actually to make a bass for a change that wasn't just like, you know, a big room kick kind of thing. It actually has, you know, sort of a rhythm to it. It's got a bit of a call and response. You will hear there's an A and a B. This is pretty much all made in Serum. I like to just scroll through a bunch of presets until I find something that I like and then tweak it from there until it sounds good. I believe this was a Cymatics preset for one of them. And then the other one was, honestly, who the fuck knows, from one of the 50 packs that I've got. Yeah, so it's pretty much just 3 layers. There's a sub, big fat juicy sub there, which is just playing the sub frequencies. There's that low one, which you can only really hear in the second half, that kind of covers, kind of the 100 to sort of 300-ish range, really warm, dirty kind of the bass range. And yeah, as you'll hear on top of that, really dirty, distorted, disgusting. I love it. Super saturated, actually beat crushed it, I think, from memory, to really get it to sound dirty as shit. I was heavily inspired by loopers. I love loopers, Seth Hills, how they make their basses just so, just like, they need a fucking shower after listening to their tracks. They're that dirty. So I was trying to recreate something similar with the bass, and I think we got there. I think we did a pretty good job. Pretty happy with how it turned out. The leads. Then we have that fill from the bass. That sample, by the way, a lot of people have asked me how that was made. I believe that was actually straight from a Looper's sample pack. It was either a sample or is from his Serum presets. Either way, super fat, such a sick sound. You basically just fuck around with the LFO on the frequency and on the pitch as well. The leads, as with pretty much everything else I make, all made in Sylenth and Serum. When I say made, I mean I take presets and then tweak them a little bit. Mainly because I know how to use Sylenth and Serum super well, and Spire just confuses the shit out of me, to be honest. So I just stick to it. Stick to what I know. Relatively typical EDM sort of sounding synth. This one was also 3 layers as well. The process of how I made it is pretty much the same as how I make my leads that I've already showed in the Spinnin tutorial I did for vibrations. In that kind of the 3 main layers, there's my signature kind of like tremor sounding dirty fat saw in there, just at a lower volume. There's a hyper saw, obviously, to get it that typical EDM, like really wide, lots of detune. And then there's a lower one, which is kind of just a big super saw, but an octave down. And that provides a lot of kind of like the thickness as well. And yeah, really it's about just molding and EQing them together, compressing them together and saturating them as a group so that it sounds like one cohesive synth, not like a bunch of, synths like put together, right? As we hear as well, there's lots of playing around with the reverb and delay. So the reverb was on a super tight sidechain, meaning that as soon as the synth starts playing, the reverb really shoots up, and as soon as the synth starts again, it clamps back down. So it's really quite dry until the note ends, and then you hear the reverb come up. Pretty common effect in a lot of EDM tracks, and I've obviously bounced it out, reversed the reverb, and then put a tremolo on it or a transgate, and you automate the time so it kind of like let me just play it. Yeah, that effect you hear at the start where it's kind of I'm not gonna try and do it, but you hear it. It kind of comes in over time. But let's just move on. One other thing as well that you'll notice if you listen closely is after 4 bars, you'll hear another layer coming in. It's quite subtle, but what I basically did is I took the top layer of the lead, like the highest one, and I believe I duplicated it and then just added a very small delay to it. Just like on a DJ mixer, if you ever put the delay to 1/16 and you crank the delay all the way down to like a couple milliseconds, it creates that kind of flanger effect. That is, I believe, how I did it. It could have been either that or I just added like a hypersaw dimension effect in Serum. Either way, that's how I did that. But I think it helps add a lot of energy and drive to the track, and it's something that's kind of like subtle enough that it's not obvious, but definitely does add something so your ear kind of notices something's changed, but not like a super in-your-face way. A few basic chants as well in the drop to kind of add a bit of a tribal feel and a lot of kind of that human element a little bit. That's a Titus recording. It's a Hey sample, you probably heard it in a shitload of tracks. Those just help to give it that little extra. Along with the effects I have here, went pretty heavy on the effects in this one, and there's a lot of really cool effects, which I think, to be honest, without the effects, the drop would sound pretty fucking boring. So these effects really help glue everything together, really bring it to life, and make it quite exciting, in my opinion, to listen to. Yeah, so pretty cool, pretty weird sounds, to be honest. I got a lot of these from Jonas Aiden sample packs, because man, I love his stuff. Super weird. He makes some weird ass shit, but in a good way. So a lot of inspiration from him, and I basically just went through my sample library and tried to find like the weirdest sounds I could throw in there, because everything else relatively, like the swords, the bass, is it's not super unique, like relatively like generic-ish EDM, and so throwing in some weird ass samples in there really helped spice it up a little bit and really bring it to life. And obviously that big fat riser here, which I love, adds so much energy halfway through the drop. It's like this screaming hectic riser. So good. Very standard LFO riser, automating the LFO and the pitch. And yeah, that adds a lot to the track. A few stabs here as well, which are a combination of a low bass stab and a synth shot, as you'll hear as well. Just had, add a lot of energy to the first kick every 4 bars, which, helps add a lot of energy and drive to the track. And all in all, that is the drop.
We going to the top.
Only last thing I haven't covered yet, 808s in the second break when Titus comes in. Pretty standard. I've used these in a lot of tracks, like my track Titans, Legacy, all the Unbroken. A lot of those like fitness, motivational sort of tracks that I've made. And all the rest is basically exactly the same from the first breaks. So the trap plucks come back in, the drums as well to add that groove. Really basic trap drum loop from Cymatics. And yeah, all in all, I tried to keep the breaks pretty relatively basic, to be honest, because I really didn't want to take away from Titus's vocals, because the dude absolutely killed it in this part with his vocals, and so I wanted to let that really shine through and keep the instrumental fairly basic. I probably could have spiced it up a little bit more, but hey, can't change the past, so.
We going to the top.
Hey, yeah, hey, yeah, hey, yeah. Look at me catching these heights. Offer respect in the ice. I put the rock in a rock star. Chicken bands when I pull up at night. Feel like I'm Peter, I popped off. 488 with the top off. We've been touching the city and throwing these 50s. I really don't know how to stop, dog. Woke up, count guap. Flipping dough, swerving odds. Saw stuff finna turn the club to a pizzeria with these knives. Where you going to the top? Who you with? Same squad. Till they put me in a box. We gon' be wild and wide. On my way to the top. Top. On my way to the top. Let's go. Top. On my way to the top. Let's go. Top. On my way to the top. Wait, where we going? Let's go.
Bitch, we going to the top.
Love that verse. Titus absolutely nailed it when he sent me that. Didn't have to do a whole lot to it. Similar processing to what I did to Fatman Scoop. You'll hear there's a lot of different layers going on and some harmonies as well, like particularly an octave down. Kind of just gives it a lot more thickness and energy. Shitloads of reverb on this to really help it kind of sound big and grand and open and epic. And I think his ad-libs are really cool as well. He throws in these little bits and pieces, Ks and chants and reverbs that he's kind of known for. That's actually why I really wanted him on this track. So I'm glad he delivered on that as well. And all in all, that is pretty much it. Looking at the stems, relatively simple track. Quite a lot of time and effort obviously going into making each individual sound, but none of them by themselves I'd say that complicated. I think it's just a way that they all work together that makes it really work as a whole. Quick walkthrough of my mastering chain, because I know someone's going to ask this in the comments. Here's one I prepared earlier. This is basically my generic kind of DIY mastering chain that I've come up with over the years. I got the original inspiration from Luke, Respawn, if you know him. Shout out my boy Respawn. Pretty simple. I slap a gain on there at the start and I put this VUMT meter to make sure that it starts at 0. So you want that to be peaking at around about 0, which means the signal is hitting the first plugin, the first limiter, at a 0 volume, which the plugins I find just tend to perform better when it's at that level. Rather than coming in too hot, you get a lot of digital distortion and it doesn't quite sound like the way that it's supposed to. There we've got a linear EQ. This is just cutting out the bass below 32 Hertz because that's unnecessary and it's just adding extra noise really that we don't need. I then actually go into an L2 limiter, which is a little bit unconventional. I just want to chop off a few of like the really high peaks to give the compressor, which comes in next to glue, a bit of an easier time, and this should be peaking at around 4. In my opinion, that works well. It just stops the compressor like reacting to those peaks by chopping them off first, and the compressor can do a more accurate job of what it's supposed to do. At this point, I would have an exciter, but this track just didn't need it, frankly, so I took that off. I only like to add what's obviously necessary. More plugins is not always better. The exciter, I love this. The SPL twin tube, absolutely love this saturation, how it sounds. It's just, it's so perfect. This was absolutely worth 200, 300 bucks, whatever this cost. Big fan. Also, the SPL Black Box, also another incredible plugin. Big fan of that one too. An imager, which again, I would usually add here, just accentuating the stereo image in the highs. This track was already quite wide from the processing I did on the leads and stuff, and so I just didn't think it needed it. I also processed the reverb, so the reverb was stereo enhanced, which helps makes it sound bigger and wider. And all of that goes into the final plugin, which is the AOM Invisible Limiter. You can pretty much pick any limiter you want. I just love the way this one sounds, as the name indicates. It is fairly invisible, doesn't add a lot of clipping or anything like that. I think it's very transparent. And it's the way I like to sound. I like T-Racks as well, they work well. T-Racks just stopped working with this version of Logic, so I just went back to the visible limiter. And then I just like to monitor at the end with WLM Plus and Span Plus as well, just to make sure that one, it's consistent with my reference track. I like to always compare to reference tracks. I used a couple loopers tracks for this particular track. And then... And it really depends on the track what you can get away with, and this is where it comes down to kind of personal preference. But I like the LUFs to be hitting, around -6 or a little bit lower sometimes, even like -5 if it's like more hardstyle track. Yeah, because it's like a vocal track. I don't want to go balls to the wall and like squash it too much. So that's what sounded good for me. All in all, there's a little walkthrough of how I made my track with Fatman Scoop and Titus. To the top, out now on Maxximize/Spinnin. Go get amongst it, get around it, tell your friends, tell your grandma. Hope you enjoyed this little tutorial, hope you found it useful in some way. On that note, I'm once again hungry and probably gonna go eat some tacos. So on that note, big love, and I'll see you soon.